Today's experience was sent to us by our dear sister from America. God, by His mercy, had revealed to her what is meant to happen before the year runs out on the American soil. Kindly stay to the end to full understand her experience. My name is Lillian Carben. The Lord revealed to me what I believe to be the plan of the devil against our beloved nation America. I wish believers out there will listen and prepare for what lays ahead. I had this encounter on the 2nd of October. It was just another day at the orphanage where I worked as a nanny. I had always loved my job. Being around the children, caring for them, and seeing their innocent smiles brought me so much joy and fulfillment. Every morning, I woke up eager to serve and give them the love they deserved. That day wasn't any different, or at least it didn't seem like it would be. But as the hours passed, I noticed something was off. My usual excitement and inner joy were missing. My mood felt unusually dull, almost as if a cloud hung over me. Some of my colleagues asked if everything was okay, sensing my demeanor had changed. "I'm fine," I told them, but deep inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The strange part was, I had no idea why. There was no specific reason I could point to, but the joy that normally lit up my day just wasn't there. The day seemed to stretch endlessly. I found myself wishing for the hours to fly by so I could go home. I had never felt this way at work before. It was so unlike me. By midday, the weariness had taken over. I needed to rest, and though I wasn't in the habit of napping during work hours, I felt like I had no other choice that day. I found a quiet corner in one of the rooms and decided to close my eyes, hoping that a brief nap would revive me. As I sat there, resting my head, a strange feeling came over me. It was as if I was drifting, falling into a deep sleep, though it felt more like a trance. At first, it was disorienting. I felt myself falling, but when I opened my eyes, I couldn't see anything around me. The darkness engulfed me. I laid my head back down, and when I did, I suddenly found myself standing in the middle of a city. It didn't take long to realize where I was. The buildings, the structures, they were all familiar. I had seen them before in America. I was in the heart of a city I had once explored with excitement, and the season appeared to be Christmas seasons. It was obvious with the advert and people's dress. The scene shifted quickly. I was no longer walking among the city streets, but standing outside the White House itself. It was a normal day, or so it seemed. Tourists were scattered around, snapping photos, and people were milling about, going on with their daily lives. There was no panic, no sign of trouble, just the usual hustle and bustle of a popular landmark. Suddenly, everything changed. A deafening sound exploded in the air, and before I could comprehend what was happening, I was thrown off my feet. I couldn't tell if the attack had landed directly on the White House, but the explosion was massive. I could hear it, feel it, and in an instant, everything around me was chaotic. People, objects, everything was being flung into the air as if the world had been turned upside down. Thick clouds of smoke filled the atmosphere, making it almost impossible to see. People were screaming, and I could hear the cries of those in pain. When the smoke began to clear, the sight before me was unbearable. Bodies were scattered everywhere, some badly injured, writhing in pain, and others lying completely motionless. The once peaceful area had been turned into a war zone. Above, I saw jets roaring across the sky, their engines rumbling as they unleashed more explosives. It was clear now this wasn't just an isolated attack. A war was unfolding. The jets targeted strategic locations across the nation, dropping bombs and causing destruction wherever they flew. The White House, once a symbol of stability and power, was now in flames, surrounded by devastation. The scene shifted once again, and I found myself inside a large conference room. Around me were American leaders and military personnel, their faces grim and determined. They were discussing strategies, searching for solutions to the crisis, but no plan seemed concrete. It was as though they were overwhelmed by the chaos happening outside. As they debated, the scene shifted yet again. This time, I stood in front of one of the largest hospitals in America. I expected to see the casualties from the bombings being rushed in, but what I saw instead was far worse. Children, so many children, were lying on the floors, some on hospital beds, others on the ground with no space available for proper care. The hospital was overwhelmed, not by the victims of the attack, but by a disease that had ravaged the entire nation. I could see it in the eyes of the people rushing through the hallways and the pale, weak faces of the children lying on the cold floors. This wasn't the aftermath of bombings. The attack I had witnessed earlier seemed like a mere prelude to something far deadlier. What was happening here was a plague, a disease that had swept through the nation and decimated the youngest and most vulnerable among them. I overheard snatches of conversation from the exhausted doctors and nurses struggling to keep up. "Worse than COVID," one of them muttered, his face a mask of desperation. "It's spreading faster, and we don't have the time or the resources." I couldn't wrap my head around it at first. The images of smoke and destruction outside the White House still played in the back of my mind. But here, within these hospital walls, was an entirely different war. One that was invisible yet far more devastating. The disease didn't just attack people's bodies. It ripped away their hope, their joy, and worst of all, it was targeting the children. And there was so little anyone could do to help them. The hospital was at full capacity, and still there wasn't enough room. Children were scattered everywhere. They lined the floors, lying on thin, worn-out sheets that barely served as a barrier between their bodies and the cold, hard tile. The few hospital beds were filled, leaving the rest to suffer in makeshift spaces. Some of the children were groaning in pain, their little hands clutching their stomachs, their chests, their heads, wherever the disease had struck hardest. Others were silent, their breathing shallow, their eyes half open as though they were barely hanging on. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand that something be done. But who could I shout at? Who could I blame for this devastation? It wasn't a person or a group. It was a force, an unseen enemy ravaging the land. As I knelt down in one of the corridors, overwhelmed by the pain around me, I wept uncontrollably. I wept for the children whose futures were stolen, for the parents who would never see their little ones again, for the doctors who had to watch life after life slip through their fingers despite all their efforts. The agony in the room was suffocating. I could feel the weight of every dying breath, every labored cry, every tear. The room spun around me as my vision blurred with tears. All the love I had for children over the years seemed to pour out of me in that moment as I begged, pleaded silently with God to spare these little ones. I couldn't control my emotions. I had always loved children. My work at the orphanage had deepened my compassion for them over the years, and seeing them like this, suffering and dying, was too much to bear. I cried out, feeling utterly powerless to help. Suddenly, I woke up. Tears streamed down my face, and as I opened my eyes, I saw some of the children from the orphanage staring at me with concern. They had noticed my distress, but I couldn't explain to them what I had just seen. The vision had been so vivid, so real, that it left me shaken. That evening, as I went home, the Lord kept pressing the vision on my heart. The images of the destruction, the war, the disease, it all replayed in my mind over and over. I couldn't shake the urgency I felt. Pray, the voice in my spirit urged. Pray for the nation. The message was clear. Something catastrophic was looming, and only prayer could avert it. The Lord kept impressing upon me the importance of prayer. Whatever evil plans were being crafted against America, they would not prosper if the people of God stood in the gap. Prayer was the only weapon that could stop the devastation I had seen in my vision. As believers, we often underestimate the power of prayer. But that vision made it clear to me, prayer can change the tide of events. The future I had seen was terrifying, but it wasn't set in stone. It was a warning, a call to action. If enough of us pray, we can turn the tide and prevent the enemy's plans from succeeding. I share this experience now, urging every believer to rise in prayer. What I saw was not just a dream. It was a revelation, a warning of what could happen if we remain complacent. But with faith, prayer, and action, we can intercede for the nation and stop the plans of darkness from taking root. Let us come together and pray for America, for its leaders, and for its people. May God have mercy and protect the innocent from the calamities to come. All right, friends, this brings us to end of today's experience. Kindly like and share this video with your friends and families. Kindly subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification bell icon to be the first to get updated anytime we upload a new experience sent to us. Remain blessed.